Something that stands out for me about the series, especially this season, is the real-world implications of what you are dealing with. The idea of having to recover a nation that has fallen apart. Which parallel did you find that needed to be, what story needed to be told? And then how do you feel that that story that you're telling can speak to the audience?
Well, in some ways, the ship comes back with a cure at the end of season 2, and we think, okay, everything's solved. But actually, there's a lot more healing to be done. The country has to get put back together again, and if 9/10 of it's been wiped out, population-wise, who's left, where are they living, how are they organizing themselves, how do you get any sense of living in the 21st century again, or are you going to go back to the 16th century or 18th century? So all these questions arise of how do you organize yourself and what democracy looks like. And so that just became really interesting to us, but it wasn't the focus of what the ship was going through. So the challenge we had, which I think you'll see bears fruit in the second half of the season, is how those two stories speak to each other. How what's going on at home is related to how what's going on for Chandler in Asia. And we just want, the whole show is about, it's not just about a virus, it's about an apocalypse situation and how people deal with it. And some deal with it with cowardice, some deal with it with heroism, some become leaders, some become followers, some become villains. The beings are the best in some, the worst in others. And so there's so many different factors to that story that go beyond just fighting for the cure. It's again, fighting for our way of life and how do you build that up again. And in many ways, as I said in the panel earlier, it is a little bit like the Founding Fathers sort of, we have this country now, how are we going to organize it? And so that became kind of a cool question to ask inside an action-adventure show.
Can you preview a little bit about the virus mutation and how that plays into the story and the investigation into that over the next couple episodes?
Well, that becomes a very big focus of the next few episodes, actually, is now that Slattery's back on the ship and he can explain to Chandler, these pirates think that we poisoned them and that the virus doesn't work, and Chandler says, well, we think maybe it's a mutation, and they're trying to figure out, is there any validity to the story? What happened in Japan? And without Dr. Scott, all they have is her notebooks and Doc Rios, who was there with her when she was building the cure to begin with. And so it becomes a major part of the next chapters of the season is getting to the bottom of this possible mutation.
Do you feel, even though the politics in the show that you're dealing with are fictional, do you feel sort of any responsibility, like the tension between the U.S. and Asia? Like, how do you go about putting that in the show without becoming overly political or inflammatory?
Right. Well, since this show began, we've had issues of politics creeping in. So the first season we had Russian bad guys. Mm-hmm. And this was just as Vladimir Putin was sort of saber-rattling over there. For us, it wasn't about that. For us, the Russians kind of came as a relic from the original book, but also we were looking for places that had powerful navies, and I wanted some colorful characters and different languages being spoken. And so this was a rogue admiral, it wasn't supposed to be reflective of what is going on in Russia. And frankly, I don't think the Russians really worry about what our little show does to say that to them. And then, same thing goes with China. There is a big interest in what goes on in that part of the world for our Navy. And so it made sense that as you're spreading the cure, that might become a place where things crop up. Again, it had nothing to do with the current or even former communist leadership in China. It was a guy who used to run Secret Service who killed his colleagues and took power. So we kind of feel like everyone recognizes it's a show, and the bigger thing for us is humanizing these villains and giving the devil their due. Like, we don't like to have characters that just are evil, and especially as you see in Takahaya, you're starting to get a sense now there's more dimensions to this character than at first appear. So if we get that part right, I think stereotypes or political posturing doesn't become as much of a problem. At the end of the day, we are just a TV show trying to tell a fun story around the world, and we're not trying to say that any one country that we decide to go to is the villain, reflects their own current or any part of their government.
Can you confirm, is Rachel Scott dead? Definitively?
Rachel Scott is definitely dead.
Okay, so those rumors that maybe she's out there somewhere.
That was wishful thinking, and truthfully,
That
you know,
was clever. Someone was suggesting it.
I wasn't suggesting,
Yeah.
but I have to say, you know, it was painful for us to lose the character and the actress from the show. It was a big loss for all of us. And that's sort of the point, too. It's a big loss for Chandler. It's a big loss for the world. If the virus is mutating and you don't have the woman who saved the world to begin with there, that's a huge deficit. And as opposed to seeing her constantly, I think I've got it. Oh, no, I don't got it. Oh, I got it. This was, she's gone. We have our notebooks. What can we do? And also, how does that affect Chandler? And the fact that he had a moment with her at the end of the last season where he could have invited her into his room. They could have had a connection. And he let her go, and then she gets shot, and he lives with that grief. So for us, her death was an artistic blow for the characters, and something that adds to the burden that Chandler carries around with him. But you know, definitely people were upset with her death, and which means a lot to us, which means they cared and they loved the character as much as we did. But you know, it's painful when we lose characters we love, but that's also the nature of the show we're telling. Anyone can die at any moment.
One more minute, just want to make sure that gets.
Do you have any?
Mine is just, what can you tell us or tease about new enemies or threats coming up this season?
This season?
Yeah.
I think it's not so much about new enemies or threats. It's about threats that have been there the whole time. We just didn't know it.
Okay.
And it's about looking at threats from a different point of view. Mm-hmm. So, as I said, the first half of the season is like, what the hell's going on? And the second half of the season is, oh my God, that's going on?
Oh, okay.
And so, yeah.
Cool, thank you.
And there's a train,
Oh.
as you saw in the trailer.
Yeah.